everyone to today's webinar, and I'm going to have Kevin Kelly from the Community Action Partnership get us started today. Take it away, Kevin.
Hello, thank you for participating today. Hope it's not as hot where everybody is as it is here in Washington, D.C. Glenn is going to do the lion's share of today's presentation. I'll come on at the end because I'd like to talk a little bit about some capital that we have here at the partnership and how you might want to access that. But I'll save that for the end, and we'll turn it over to Glenn and let him do a share of today's presentation. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. See here. I'm kind of going over the agenda real quick where we've kind of gone through the introductions. I'm going to talk a lot about the use of debt and some issues around using debt. Kevin will come back and talk about the loan fund, which is a real important resource, as you'll probably see during my presentation, and then we'll follow up with questions and answers. Kind of my background, I was with a nonprofit for about 12 years, involved with community development activities. We had a subsidiary business, and we did some affordable housing projects. After that, I was with BA for about 12 years and really focused on community development lending from the bank. Had a chance to work with a lot of the folks that I kind of knew from my nonprofit days, so we were able to figure out ways of getting them capital, whether it was in kind of an equity form, non-debt forms, or debt itself. And so that's where some of my knowledge on debt underwriting debt will come from, kind of the banking side of the world, which guides a lot of lending these days anyways. Recently, I've been, for actually 15 years, doing technical assistance with Cdfi. And I'm going to give a quick overview of what Cdfi is to give you a sense of our background. We work and work a lot of nonprofit groups. We started in California, but work with groups throughout the nation. These are key partners. We do a lot of work with regulatory agencies. We a lot of special reports, special services for different financial institutions. On the federal level, we have a lot of subcontracts with through a lot of different federal programs. You can see the list there. On the national organization side, we work with organizations such as the partnership, but as well as other national kind of community development organizations. On the level, we work with the Community Action Partnership here in California, but in California we work with state community services and development vision, and with them, they provide financing for us to do a lot of direct technical assistance. And our technical assistance, essentially, we work with groups who are trying to do projects. We try to help them move projects along. We found that year after year, we'll talk to an organization working on a project, and in the next year, we see them, they're still kind of stuck in the same spot. And so what we try to do is to provide the assistance to move that project forward. It gives the opportunity to see a lot of great projects out there, as well as kind of run across all the kind of issues and problems that you'll probably see in projects going forward. Both our website, as well as the Community Action Partnership website under their Community Economic Development section, we have a number of these how-to guides. So we're going to be teaching on a lot of these different subjects, but you can pull them down, take them online, and then also pull them down and have them printed. But they're pretty detailed how-to guides, and they can take you through how to do one of these projects, all the things that you need to kind of consider. It's a step-by-step guide. It also has a lot of information on resources that are available that you could talk to, people you can talk to And we also have a big section on sources of financing to make these deals work. The last kind of thing we throw in, a lot of them are kind of things that we've run across, things that are important that you should consider prior to moving forward. It's kind of like the big things that'll pop up during a project. And these include all kinds of projects, I mean, all the way from real estate development to business development. It could be involved with financing, you could be involved with business development activities, but you could also be involved, I've got a fire truck going by here, but also be involved in starting your own business or creating enterprises that generate jobs and generate income for your organization. So C covers a wide spectrum of types of projects and activities, and hopefully these guides will really give you an idea of what you're getting involved in and what some of the issues you might have, and hopefully it will help guide you out of some of those issues and problems you might have. Versus equity, and that's essentially loans versus grants. I think in the back of our minds, we all know that loans are tough. Grants are always good to have. Grants, in terms of equity, those dollars, you need to pay them back. Loans be repaid, so that's the killer in using debt financing or loans on projects. And in most cases, you know, they have to be paid on time on a consistent basis. But it's important, both are very important sources of financing projects. Grant or equity in projects are an important piece, but it's getting tougher to get, especially for bigger projects with big impact. So then that kind of pushes people to think forward and look at debt as another source of financing. So kind of projects, and I'm going to kind of go up and down a spectrum all the time, focused on types of projects and types of tenants, and those are two key drivers on how much debt you can really have in a project. So facilities, which a lot of groups are involved in doing, and these are service centers. It could be a health clinic, it could be a food services type facility, but in all cases, or recreation center, tenants that typically can't pay rent. So in that situation, you don't want debt in projects. So you're thinking all the time on who your tenant is, whether or not they can, there's a consistent source of rent that they could pay, which in turn pays for that debt. So projects that we found are community facilities in general usually don't generate income, and you have to really kind of focus on and what they could provide. Single room occupancy, and this was an interesting thing that happened in LA, and this is probably a good 25 years ago, when tax credits first came out. A lot of SROs, or single room occupancy projects, banks were involved and provide a small piece of debt in those projects. And they, oh yeah, there was plenty of cushion. The sources of income came from kind of the welfare payments that the tenants were receiving. So everything seemed to work well. These projects were able to generate income and pay for a little slice of debt in projects. But it went on, and the state, both in California as well as nationally and in most states, started cutting back on a lot of these service-type payments to elderly and to the poor. Those dollars shrank dramatically, and all of a sudden folks couldn't pay the rents that were being charged in those projects. They had to reduce them since their incomes were being reduced, and resulted in a major problem where a lot of the banks had to write off those loans or require the developer to come up with more money to pay down that debt. There just wasn't any money being generated from those tenants to make the project work. And so a lot of financial institutions and developers got caught short-handed when that happened. Other examples of kind of projects that shouldn't have a lot of debt, a lot of business incubators, and we're going to kind of go into that a little bit more. But basically, a business incubator, you're trying to start new businesses in it, and you're providing them a whole bunch of services. So hopefully your services are paid for by that income from the tenants, but since they're new tenants, they typically can't pay for a lot of rent going forward. So in most cases, a lot of the business incubators are heavily subsidized. They're receiving money to provide those services and to cover any expenses that go along in projects. We see the same in business startup facilities as well as training centers. That center itself can't generate the kind of income needed to cover a debt in projects. And again, I'm coming kind of from the underwriter side of the world. And if you've ever gotten any loan, even your own home loan, you know to what extent underwriters will go through every aspect of your income. And in case of these projects, they'll go through every aspect of who the tenant is, what the operating costs are, you know, what makes sense, and the underwriter is really looking for is to make sure that they get their money back. There you go. Okay, so looking at the use of debt, so again, you know, we kind of focus a bit on tenant strength. So the strong tenant, the financially sound tenant in your building, and it could be yourself, it could be other folks, they are most likely to pay rent on an ongoing basis. So typically what these tenants are usually called are the rated tenants. And these are the major companies, the major food stores. These are the major chains and different businesses that have kind of a rating from different underwriters that everyone knows that this is a real strong business entity, and thus if you get those types of tenants into your project, and in most cases you're doing some sort of a retail project, a strong tenant in there, then they're a lot easier to underwrite, and banks are willing to really look at those a lot more. Not strong are government entities, and really kind of varies. I mean, if you have a federal entity like a post office or a Social Security office, those very, very strong tenants versus, you know, having kind of a new program or a health referral agency that's kind of federally funded. It's a bit weaker, but they are pretty good, pretty strong tenants that will be around year after year. Profit organizations, you know, the underwriter's really looking at them as tenants, but they're looking at how big they are and how long they've been in business and how strong they are. They will look at if, you know, any one tenant is the majority cover is using the majority of the space, then you're looking at really the writer or the bank or whoever's providing the financing, or really focus in on their financial statements, you know, whether or not they can see that the organization could pay and could continue to pay whatever is needed to cover their rent. business operations in 3 years. So even if you have retail tenants, if they've been in operation for 3 or more years, they're considered a lot stronger than new startups. So, even on a small business kind of a spectrum, those that have been around longer and been successful are a lot easier to take a look at in an underwrite versus, the new startups. And here, if you have weak tenants, businesses with no financials, a lot of new startups or businesses, and a lot of the ethnic communities that don't have good records, then you have a lot weaker tenants. So you have to be really careful that your project has very little debt or none at all. Again, startups, better to have business startups if they have an experienced manager versus a new business startup with no management experience. So there's even a range kind of tied into that. Let's see. Different categories, cash flow. Let me kind of get all this up here. So looking at micro businesses or incubator tenants, by definition, they need to be subsidized. They need to have that service and business support. What you're providing these tenants are a lot of services on an ongoing basis so that they can grow. So cash flow and reliability is very uncertain. You have no idea whether or not tenants could pay kind of month to month, year to year. Small business startups, cash flow, and the reliability for them to make those payments is uncertain. Small businesses, 2 years or less, again, also very uncertain in terms of their reliability to make payments. Small businesses, if you're doing a project and you do have tenants, you have to become the underwriter and really kind of understand their business and understand whether or not they can make payments on an ongoing basis. Because they do, then you end up paying the debt on the project, which is probably in your name at this point. So categories, again, business expansion. If a business is expanding or growing, it's locating in your project, then it's real important to look at their financial statements to see if they could really grow into that space that's being provided. The organization or program is a very strong tenant if you know it's a program that you've been running for a while. So, for example, if you've been doing different authorization services for a number of years, and you can know your contract amount and what you receive year over year and what you've used to the dollars set aside for base costs, if that's pretty consistent or shows that the dollars are always there, then it's easy to look at that, for someone to look at that and say, oh yeah, they can afford this amount of debt because they've got kind of a tenant that is somewhat strong and provable. Again, government, we kind of talked a little bit about that, and then again, best is the rated tenants. And so there's kind of a two issue there. On one hand, they're highly sought after. You want your project. They're very reliable peers, but know that too, and because they know that, they'll want breaks in terms of lease payments. They're anchoring or the strongest tenant in your project, and because of that, they want a cheaper rate. So it kind of works both ways with them. risk mitigation. So if you're doing any kind of project and you are relying on income or having your tenants be successful in order to pay you, and this counts for your projects, your organization that might be using the space, you have to underwrite that tenant, really know whether or not they can make those payments. If you're doing a community center or you've got extra space in your building and you're relying on that income to cover some of your debt needs, you can make sure that they can make that payment on an ongoing basis. It's very similar to if you're renting an apartment. You want to make sure that that tenant could pay in the long term. Banks underwrite it, but some of the things that banks always do, and even in all these different categories of risk, having a strong tenant or a weaker one, they'll put in requirements on projects. And there's, one thing that they might do is require a rated tenant or require a guarantor or someone to guarantee the loan. In mixed-use projects, early on, they separate the commercial from the housing. The housing was considered less risky and didn't want the commercial to take down the housing, so they would separate the project and kind of compromise the two different pieces, so that the financing for the housing focused on the housing only, financing for real estate came from a different place. They might require is higher operating reserves in projects, so that there's extra money available if if operations don't go as planned, that there is a hunk of money there available for that. They'll underwrite it, and these are something lenders will do. They'll underwrite it with a high vacancy rate, saying only half of your rents, for example, are really reliable, so we're gonna use half of that amount that you're showing as income to determine the size of your loan. Another thing that we've seen a lot of is that the bank financial institution, they'll require a master release by the nonprofit. So, for example, if you were doing a project and you had 3 new startups that you wanted to locate into the project, and you had 2 other ones that were kind of ongoing businesses, they would, one out of it is say, well, since your organization has financial strength, you become the leaseor of the space, meaning you're the one who is on the hook to make those payments. And if your tenants can't, then you're the one who's going to end up filling those gaps. So it works fine if you know your project is going to be successful, but if there's that uncertainty, then you just don't want that much debt in the project. It's just not worth it at that point. If you're certain you could take the risk, then you can. But if you're where your tenants really are, then you want to reduce that amount of debt for that project. So essentially, that's what's happening there. Risk is thrown back to the Community Development Corporation. So again, getting back to the PC, the community group who's doing projects, you underwrite the tenant. The stronger your tenant, the more debt tolerance, the more debt you can have in project. Weaker tenants, you want less debt or no debt, actually. Other important part about having weaker tenants is that if you are an organization focused on kind of business development activities, and one that you want to make sure that your tenants in your project have access to business technical assistance, as well. The other bit is as well as sources of financing, so someone can help them if they get in trouble. It's the same if you're doing a housing project. You want to make sure that they have services, housing counseling services, as well as financial planning services for your tenants to make sure that they're able to manage their way through owning whatever properties they have. So the services become very, very important to making sure your tenants are strong and stay active and can grow, because they're the ones who, again, are ultimately paying for any debt you might have on the project. Access to capital is real important. If there's a shortfall in the business, that they're able to access some small business financing. If I get going here. Projects. The one that people don't realize, that I think most of you who do realize, is if you own properties, is that operating expenses are always going to be there. So you can have a building that is debt-free, but you have to have ongoing dollars available just to pay for operating expenses. So you might have a recreation facility. Sure, it doesn't have any debt on it, but someone's got to pay for the electricity. They've got to pay for the air conditioning. They've got to pay for insurance. They've got to pay for management expenses. So these are all ongoing expenses that have to be paid for. And the source of those dollars is either you have subsidy coming in from some place on a consistent basis, or your tenants have to be able to make minimal payments to cover that pieces that are involved in their project. So when you really look at incubators, especially, we've been doing a lot of work recently with kitchen incubators, and that becomes a real tough thing because operating expenses are very, very high for kitchen incubators, primarily due to utilities. You've got refrigeration going on 24 hours. You've got really high electrical use type equipment running at all hours. You've got stoves that are burning, whether it's gas or electricity on an ongoing basis. So the utility costs are very, very high in these projects. So again, either you have a source of subsidy on an ongoing basis to provide for operating expenses, and on top of that, you're paying for services or providing services, and sources of dollars have to come for that. So when you're thinking about projects, it's one, covering the cost of the development. The second issue is your ongoing expenses that you got to cover for a project. So keep that in mind. I think we've been working with about 6, 7 incubators, kind of food incubators, kitchen incubators, commercial kitchens, and we've only seen one right now that is kind of generating income. And this is a project out in Hawaii that's pretty substantial, but we've been able to use the facility almost 24 hours a day. They've got people who come into the kitchen and use it in the evenings, and they've got the tenants during the day, and they're able to cut down some of their very high electrical costs by getting a grant to put in a solar system on their project to help subsidize the cost of the utilities. So they use every trick in the book to make sure that the project or the tenant, the income that they were getting, really kind of covered all their expenses, their utility expenses and management expenses, and also was able to cover their service programs that they're providing. So it becomes real important to know what those expenses are in your project, especially if you have a project that's going to have ongoing expenses that are going to be pretty high. So great wear and tear. So there's a lot of wear and tear involved in those types of projects that need ongoing maintenance. You've got a lot of young folks who are running all over the project on a consistent basis. Kind of financial, my financial program here, it covers the two key areas that everyone looks at in determining how much debt you have in a project. And first one is debt service coverage, DCR. You'll see that acronym all over. Net operating income. So you look at your net operating income and you compare that to what debt service you have to pay. So net operating income is the income after you pay for all your expenses. That's what your dollars that you have available to pay for debt service. So you have a monthly gross rent of $100,000. Your operating expenses is $50,000. Your net operating income is $50,000. And your debt service on your project is $40,000. Then you have a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio, meaning you have about 25% of cushion in there that you can, things could go wrong, and you have 25% less income, and you'll still be able to make your debt payments. Now, in affordable housing, what we saw are a lot of debt service coverage ratios that, and this is what the bank would require or a lender would require in their loan programs. The most aggressive we've seen is like 1.05, meaning, there's for every $105 you have available, you've got debt service coverage of you've got debt of $100, and you've got $105 available to pay that debt. So the cushion is really small there. So you'll see the number jump up and down quite a bit depending on what they see in terms of risk in your deal or how strong your tenants are. The second, loan to value, and it's essentially your total loan amount, which is the value of the property. And most commercial banks, that number is 80%. That, they'll never lend above 80% of what the value of the real estate is. The number will vary depending, again, on what's going on in the marketplace. In affordable housing, and that's the three subcategories there. Value is subjective, but a lot of the subsidized dollars will give it a value, and that kind of goes into the value side of the equation. Loan to cost is actually a different number because the actual cost of the project might be very high, where the economic value of the project could be a lot lower. So, for example, and affordable projects fall in that category, where the affordable housing project, it might cost $10 million to build, but because rents are so small that the value of the building, the economic value when an underwriter or appraiser looks at it, might be only $2 million, because you're only rating enough income to make that value worth $2 million. So, in order to make that work, there are ways that underwriters will build in what the value is of all the equity in the deal, of subordinate financing and other things. So they're pretty close to the appraised value is. It comes out close to what you really need in a project. But will be the cutoff point in all cases. So this chart here is kind of a lot of different ways. What we're really looking at there is a nonprofit developer versus a for-profit developer. And to get the highest amount of debt in a project, the nonprofit developer would have to have a really rated commercial tenant and have a lot of high political community visibility on this project. Where a for-profit developer, they go by their experience and the amount of collateral they have. If they have experience, they have the collateral, they have a strong commercial tenant, you get a loan that's has the value of 80% and a debt service coverage ratio of 1.15. So, you'll get a big loan based on having those strengths. In the current market, what we've seen are loan-to-values of around 75%, debt service coverage at 1.20, meaning 20% extra cash is available to cover debt payments. But then, for-profit developer, again, they're going to have the collateral, but they'll also have pre-lease tenants. And then for the nonprofit, you're looking at having those requirements. There are a guarantee or sublease. You're going to have pre-lease tenants. So the nonprofit to do the deal, they're going to have rated tenants, or they're going to have a lot of pre-lease spaces. They're going to have to provide a guarantee, or they'll be subleasing. They'll be kind of a master tenant and have subleases. And when you look at the chart, it kind of continues on and breaks down to all down towards the bottom there, where there's no debt. But still, in projects in terms of the nonprofit, you really have to look at reliable cash flow just to cover expenses, because you've got high expenses in some projects. If you have low expenses in a project, where it might be a building that's already solarized, that's been around for a while, that can take, that's been kind of in good condition on an ongoing basis, and you don't have a lot of expenses, utility expenses, management expenses, then you can look at tenants that might not have as a reliable cash flow available. Okay, to summarize, debt, you can get more debt if you have an anchor tenant, you're in a strong market, you have guarantees, then it works down the line there. Subleases, high political community visibility, and non-profit with strong financials. So you have things like these, you can get more debt. What we recommend, there should be no debt in incubators, community facilities, retail centers if your tenants are startups or new type of businesses. Quick note on affordable housing. There's a big difference in looking at affordable housing versus other commercial. When underwriting affordable housing, rents are typically below market, so there's always a demand for the space. You'll see lines of people looking to use that space because the rents are below market. Other commercial, you're usually your rents aren't below market, so it becomes the whole issue of real estate having the right location. If you're doing a commercial center or a community facility in your neighborhood, you have to really look at the competition who might have spaces available in a better neighborhood, and you're really kind of competing for that, the tenants to locate in your space, and the decision will be made not by what the rent is, but more by location. So it becomes a lot more important. I'm going to zoom through some of this because a lot of it is available in books that we were looking at. Let me back up here. So this is a debt. Banks and financial institutions. Looking to find, if you're talking to a commercial bank or any financial or regulated financial institution, you want to make sure you get to the right department. Most of them do have a community development department, and those are the folks you want to talk to versus the commercial real estate or the commercial lenders. So you want to kind of stay away from them. You want to find the right person within a financial institution who will kind of support your project. So you're looking at, even in a community development bank, you're looking for somebody who really wants to do the deal, who is really interested in it, to really shepherd your deal through the process. The other thing is CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act. There really is no such thing as a CRA loan. Community Reinvestment Act kind of forces banks to do lending in areas in which they serve, but it's not for them to take more risks than deal. They still have to meet the same risk tolerances, the same guidelines as any other commercial real estate, but they're willing to make that extra effort in making the deal work, and that's out of the community development folks. Funds and CDFIs are the sources for financing for most nonprofit type deals. Loan fund, and the difference between a loan fund and CDFI, a loan fund, a CDFI is a loan fund. CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, is a name granted to you through the Department of Treasury. So the Department of Treasury has a lot of guidelines on what a CDFI should have and are capable of doing. So if you meet those kind of thresholds as a loan fund, they could become a CDFI, and you can actually access dollars from the Department of Treasury. And so the CDFI is just kind of a name been reviewed by the Department of Treasury and show the capacity to actually get deals done, and they show a track record. So what we found is that by being a CDFI, you're a lot more apt to receive funding from banks and other financial institutions and from foundations. They typically will use that as kind of the horizon or the cutoff point on where they will invest their money or they'll provide grants to. So CDFIs are usually a little bit bigger. They got more, they've got more experience, although loan funds could have the same amount of experience. They can have the same amount of capital. They just haven't used the Department Treasury door to get that title. So they're very important sources. What we've seen in most of the deals that we get involved in, that they are the ones who are providing the financing. So they receive funds from other sources, but they have the ability to underwrite and really understand the community that they're located in, the type of financing they're doing. I'm going to skip through this because we have this information really focused on one of the manuals, but tax-exempt owner carry financing is a really important source if you're looking for debt in a project. So essentially, what this all says, if you're a nonprofit organization, you can use bond financing through a 501c3 bond finance window, essentially, to get your project financed. And doing that, you'll have a loan that is about any 1.5% to maybe up to 2.5% to 3% lower than at conventional rates. So the conventional market right now is at about 4 or 5% for commercial loans. You'd be able to get a loan at somewhere around 3%. So a nice source. The owner carryback part is really important because the owner could actually, instead of instead of providing a loan to the deal, to the project, and carrying back financing, that financing is tax-free to the owner who's carrying the financing. So instead of him providing a $300,000 loan, owner carryback into a project, they are providing $300,000 that's tax-free income. So all the interest that they charge the project, they're getting it tax-free at that point. So it really is a big deal, and it kind of really boosts their yield in projects. So if you're any project where the owner is willing to carry back financing and you're going to use the project for a nonprofit use, tell us or take a look at the manuals there. And owner carry back financing works well. It's a great source of cheap financing in projects. Gaps. Kind of zoom through this. I want to get to the equity on housing, low-income housing tax credits. In commercial projects, new markets tax credits are a great source. Foundations and corporate entities that provide grants. You know, if you look at those entities out there, Federal Home Loan Bank, if you're in a state that has a Federal Home Loan Bank program, they've got dollars available for commercial or community economic development projects. CG Home, HS, the Community Economic Development Grants, the CED grants. We did a session, our session was focused on that, so make sure you take a look at that off the website. Economic Development Administration provides dollars in projects as well as USDA. Cdfi through the U.S. Treasury provides a lot of grant funds and technical assistance dollars for loan funds. Justice Department, a lot of dollars available for manpower programs. Program-related investments, a lot of the foundations have program-related investments. Essentially what they do is kind of create low-interest loan that could be used in your projects, and it comes from different and other financial institutions. U2s are equity-like instruments, and banks usually put these together. They're kind of equity-type loans that are provided for nonprofits. Like for Wells Fargo has one, I think it's around 3% now. They'll provide you 3% money you could use for your projects or for your loan funds, and that's kind of on an ongoing basis. For a quick look at projects, this would be for affordable housing projects. You know, what we mentioned, they are below market rents, so you know you can get a lot of financing in projects, and these are kind of like different sources. Now, most of those are equity sources, so you're looking at tax credit equity, you're looking at home dollars, which is equity, RD dollars, which is equity. The only financing is really the bond loan there. CNO projects, these are family projects in Nevada, and these are examples of some affordable housing projects throughout the state, in California, multi-housing projects, commercial real estate projects. Now, this project has CED dollars on the equity side, and these are your tenants in this project, so they're able to get a lot of financing for the projects that they're involved in, and these are the really strong rated tenants in those projects. In this project here in Ajo, Arizona, a group bought this plaza in a small town in southern Arizona. The plaza itself is a commercial center that they've been rehabbing, but they have debt in this project primarily from some owner carryback financing that is really kind of killing them. So at this point, they don't have the tenants that are strong enough to support the existing debt. So that's kind of become an issue for their project. If they kind of looking backwards, if they really saw who their tenants are and who they're trying to cater to, they would really kind of focus on not having as much debt in the project as they have now. Switched over here. This project here is a nonprofit. It's 10,000 square foot. They have a charter school, a Head Start center. They've got offices located for the nonprofit. Heavily, a lot in this project, but they've got tenants that they know can pay. They're actually businesses that they operate and have been paying paying high rents all along. And by being into this project, they continue to make their debt payments. So a lot of debt in it, but they've got strong tenants. The project here is an example of receiving funds from a Cdfi. This is during the market downturn that we were experiencing. We couldn't find any financing, but we went to a Cdfi that provided financing for the project. This is an example of the incubators in Hawaii. Now, the one on the left is a food incubator that is generating income that cover their expenses. The one on the right, their business incubator, is getting close to being able to generate enough income. It only works because they've got a really strong tenants in there. SOC built this multi-purpose recreation center and no debt in the project. So you can see the sources that they use here, all different grant funds, both public and private sector, mostly public sector, and it's used to cover all the expenses on the project. The issue on the project now is who's paying for the ongoing services and incur the expenses on it, and the city is kind of backing off. But again, it's something else that you have to consider going forward. This project we're working on in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. I want to show you this because it's all fundraised. It's all grant dollars, but the big gap of about $2.5 million is going to be made up from New Markets tax credits. We're going to bring it into the project, and so it's got equity from New Markets tax credits as well as grant dollars. Echo Forest is a business enterprise. They actually have debt they use a lot of debt in their projects, but they have really strong service contracts that enables them to cover those expenses. And is the end of my portion of the presentation. I hope I left enough time for you, Kevin, and then we can cover questions. So we're going 15. So
I think you covered a lot of material there. I just have three things I want to go over that's very specific in this case. That we have some. What do I look here?
Oh, yeah.
All right. I want to say something, Kathy, because I'm not sure everybody knows what it is. It was created a couple of years ago. Partnership, basically, we're a subsidiary to do economic development, and specifically, at least at the beginning here, we have some loan capital. This is what to community agencies, $450,000, as you can see here, and it's available for you to borrow and then to relend to businesses in your community. There's a bunch of different uses it can be put to. Some examples here. Focus on job creation. We're getting the money from OCS. Of course, they want to see jobs created. So we would ask you to tell us who you loan the money to, but how many jobs are created, how many of those went to low and moderate income people. But it can be for term loans, bridge loans, lines of credit even. So it's pretty flexible. And startup costs, other typical things like working capital and equipment and so forth. The type of business is really up to you. From looking at some of our members' websites, that there's some of them have focus, like agricultural businesses, energy-related businesses, tourism, daycare. I've seen all those examples, but it could be whatever your particular area to need a market for that will work. It's easy to access. We have a one-page application form and the loan agreement. And like I said, we need to tell OCS what you're doing with it, so you'll need to submit reports to us quarterly with some basic information. It's not real risk. And I urge you to think about this. I already have some loan capital. Maybe give you another source. If you don't have any, this is a e-source compared to some others. We're going to be trying to raise some money from other places as well once we get some out onto the street. But here's my direct phone number. So if you have any questions or you're interested in this, give me a call and we can talk about it in more detail. But I just wanted everybody that we have this resource available, and I hope to be talking to you about it. Also, be a conference. We're going to have a table. We have some workshops, and want to be on this program. We can talk in more detail there as well. Have we got any questions that have come in yet?
I haven't seen any questions, but do encourage people to put those in the chat window as soon as you come up with them. So we'll give you a moment to get those typed up if they are coming in. So with that, any final thoughts, Glenn, that you were wanting to share with the group?
And I think the CAP loan fund, it's really important to know that that's available because, you know, one thing about Cdfis and other loan funds, it's not, it's the geographically isn't great at all. You know, you might be somewhere where there's a strong small business lending financial CFI or loan fund, but they don't do nonprofit deals, or they only do housing deals. And you know, it might be a great one that does looks at nonprofit deals, but they're not in your state or they don't cover your region. And that was part of the reason that this loan fund is kind of put together, is to cover those kind of gaps, especially for the membership who might be in an area that's not being serviced by other loan funds or doesn't have the right product. So, you know, it's a real important step to have a fund like this available. In most cases, you know, what we've seen is that, you know, they're your best sources of finding financing on any project. Their rates will always be better, and they'll understand what kind of deal you're putting together. You don't have to convince them that you're a nonprofit or you're a small business and convince them that it makes sense for them to be lending to you. So it's a good program.
Thanks, Glenn.
I don't see any questions that have come in, so I guess we have a quiet group today. But of course, this isn't your last chance to get anything in. After today's event, you are welcome to reach out to us here at the partnership. Kevin has his direct line up there, as well as earlier in the presentation, we had Glenn's contact information up. We'll be handing out those slides to everyone who registered, so you'll have that as a reference. And hope that we'll be able to see you in just over a month in Austin, Texas. As mentioned, we do have kind of a CAFE 101, who is CAFE, session, as well as 3 or 4 really good community economic development sessions. So encourage you to make your travel plans to see you in Austin. So with that, have a great rest of the afternoon, and thanks for joining us.